Don't expect to touch a single penny of my husband's 30 million. Joyce's words cut through the marble air like a blade, her tone dripping with contempt. She looked at me as if I were some beggar who had stumbled into her perfect palace. My hands, scarred and hardened from decades of honest labor, trembled. Not from fear, but from the kind of pain only a mother can know. Pain from being told, to my face, that I was worthless in the world my son had built. If you're watching this, subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from. My name is Clara Thompson, 68 years old, a widow from Texas. My husband, Robert, died young in a construction accident, leaving me to raise our only child, Michael, with nothing but grit and sacrifice. For decades, I worked night shifts at the local factory, patched cars in a dusty garage, and pawned away pieces of my life just to keep Michael's dreams alive. I even sold our wedding car so he could afford business school in California. Every dollar I earned went into his education, his chance at a life bigger than mine. I never regretted it. His smile, the same boyish grin that could light up a room, was my only reward. I remember the day he caught his first fish at Lake Meredith. He was only 8, holding up that tiny bass with both muddy hands, his missing tooth shining in a grin as wide as the sky. I snapped a photo, framed it, and set it on my workbench in the garage. The glass cracked years later, but I never replaced it. That photograph was more than paper. It was a reminder of the boy I raised. Before money, before Beverly Hills, before Joyce. Joyce. She swept into Michael's life like a storm in high heels. Polished, beautiful, sharp as broken glass. She knew exactly how to smile for photographs at charity galas and exactly how to look down on me at family gatherings. To her, I was just a relic from a world she didn't want my son to remember. And slowly, the calls came less often. The visits stopped altogether. Even on Thanksgiving, all I received was a glossy card with his signature printed by some assistant. Then came the call that shattered me, a doctor's voice, flat but firm, over the static of my garage phone. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry. Your son, Michael, he suffered a massive heart attack at his office this morning. He's gone." Oh, I dropped the wrench I was holding. It clattered against the concrete, echoing through the garage like a gunshot. My knees gave way, and I slid down the oil-stained wall, unable to breathe. By nightfall, I had packed my old canvas suitcase with a few clothes, my shaving kit, and that cracked photo of Michael. Then I drove 12 hours straight to Los Angeles, gripping the steering wheel through tears I couldn't stop. I thought, at the very least, I could stand beside my daughter-in-law and honor my son together. But when I stepped onto the gleaming marble floor of Michael's mansion in Beverly Hills, Joyce didn't welcome me. She didn't even offer condolences. Instead, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Don't expect a penny of his 30 million. The night after Joyce's cruel words, I checked into a rundown motel off Sunset Boulevard. The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat, and the room smelled of old cigarettes and bleach. I sat on the sagging bed, staring at the cracked photo frame I had carried from Texas. My son's boyish grin stared back at me, and for the first time in years, I let myself cry until there were no tears left. The next morning, I tried calling Joyce. No answer. I tried again in the afternoon, straight to voicemail. By the third attempt, I left a message. "Joyce, it's Clara. We need to discuss arrangements for Michael's funeral. Please call me back." My voice sounded small, foreign, as if it belonged to another woman. She never returned the call. Instead, I heard through a distant cousin that the funeral service had already been planned private, family only. I wasn't on the list. I, the mother who had given Michael life, was not invited to his farewell. When I arrived at the funeral home anyway, dressed in my old black dress that still smelled faintly of mothballs, the receptionist hesitated. She looked down at the guest list and then back up at me with pity in her eyes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is a private service. Mrs. Fox's instructions." My throat tightened. Behind the closed doors, I could hear muffled voices, the clink of champagne glasses, the shuffle of designer heels across polished floors. A funeral, yes, but also a performance. Joyce's performance. I stood there for a long moment, humiliated and powerless. Finally, I turned away, my boots echoing in the empty hallway. A young man in a suit, an attendant, maybe 20, at most, ran after me. "Ma'am," he whispered, pressing a small program into my hand. "I shouldn't, but I thought you should have this." The paper trembled in my grasp. Michael's name, the dates of his life, a scripture verse printed in gold. I clutched it to my chest, as if it were his heartbeat. That night, back in the motel, I made coffee with the cheap plastic machine by the sink. The bitter taste reminded me of the mornings when Michael was little, when I would sip from a chipped mug while watching him eat cereal before school. The mug was gone, broken years ago, but the memory stayed. I realized then that Joyce could take everything, the house, the cars, the spotlight, but she couldn't take those memories. They were mine, etched into every scar on my hands, every wrinkle on my face. And somehow, I knew the fight wasn't over. Friday afternoon, I stood outside the Sunset Memorial Chapel, clutching the program the young attendant had secretly handed me. The California sun was bright, almost mocking, as black sedans rolled into the parking lot. Guests in tailored suits and designer dresses stepped out, their voices hushed, their sunglasses hiding eyes that scanned for social connections more than grief. I stayed at the edge, near the old oak tree, watching from a distance. I thought maybe, just maybe, Joyce would see me and wave me in. Instead, she swept out of a limousine, her black dress perfectly cut, her heels sharp against the pavement. She dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, but her makeup remained flawless, tears painted on rather than shed. She spotted me. For a moment, our eyes locked across the parking lot. Then her lips curled into the faintest smirk. She turned her back and linked arms with a man I didn't recognize, leading him inside, as if I were invisible. I waited until everyone else had gone in before I tried to enter, but a tall usher blocked the door. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his voice low but firm. "The service is private." "I'm his mother," I whispered, my voice shaking. The usher shifted uncomfortably, but didn't move. Mrs. Fox gave very clear instructions. I felt heat rise in my chest, humiliation burning my cheeks. For a moment, I thought I might collapse right there on the chapel steps. But I steadied myself, clutched the program tighter, and turned away. From inside came the faint sound of a hymn Michael never sang as a child. He had hated church music, preferring baseball games and the crack of a bat on Saturday mornings. Yet here, in his final moments, Joyce had curated a ceremony that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with her image. As I walked back to my truck, an older woman brushed past me, pausing just long enough to whisper, "Stay strong, dear. People see more than you think." Her words clung to me like a lifeline. Someone noticed. Someone knew. That night at the motel, I laid the funeral program on the bedside table, next to the cracked photo of Michael with his fish. 2 pieces of paper, decades apart, telling the story of my son's life, one full of truth, the other full of pretense. I promised myself then, as I stared at those 2 symbols, that Joyce's cruelty would not be the final chapter. The morning after the funeral, I was packing my canvas suitcase when the motel phone rang. For a moment, I froze. No one knew I was here. My hands trembled as I lifted the receiver. "Mrs. Thompson?" A man's voice, calm and precise. "This is Seal Grant, your son's attorney. Could you come to my office this afternoon? There are matters regarding Michael's estate that concern you." Joyce's smirk from the chapel echoed in my mind. She had told me I wouldn't see a penny. What matters could possibly concern me? Still, something in Seal's tone carried weight. By 2 o'clock, I was sitting in the marble lobby of Grant and Associates, my boots squeaking against the polished floor. Receptionists moved like dancers, whispering into headsets, tapping at computers. I felt out of place, like grease stains on white silk. Seal appeared in the doorway, a silver-haired man in a tailored suit. His eyes sharp but kind. He extended his hand. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming." In his office, sunlight spilled through tall windows onto a mahogany desk, stacked with leather-bound files. Seal motioned for me to sit. "I want to express my condolences. Michael spoke of you often." My chest tightened. "He did?" Seal nodded. "He respected your sacrifices. He wanted to make sure you were protected." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But before we discuss the will, I think you should know, Joyce has been very insistent that you not be present for the reading." Of course she had. I clenched my hands in my lap. "That doesn't surprise me." Seal leaned forward. "I can't disclose details yet, but I will say this. Michael left very specific instructions. He was deliberate, thoughtful. His words felt like a spark in the dark. For the first time since my son's death, I felt a flicker of hope. I swallowed hard. "Then why am I here today?" "Because tomorrow morning, when we gather to read the will, I want you to be ready. It may not go the way Joyce expects." The weight of his words settled over me. I thought of Joyce's cold dismissal, her curated performance at the funeral. She was so certain she had won. Seal slid a leather folder toward me. "Bring this with you. It's a letter Michael wrote, sealed, addressed to you. Don't open it yet. Not until after the will is read. You'll understand why." I held the folder in both hands, the paper inside heavier than any steel I'd ever lifted. For the first time, I wasn't just a grieving mother. I was part of something larger, something that might change everything. The next morning, I walked into Seal Grant's office with the old canvas suitcase still in my hand. I had slept barely an hour, my mind turning over what he'd said the day before. Not go the way Joyce expects. The words rang in my ears like church bells. Joyce was already there when I arrived, sitting at the head of the polished mahogany conference table, like a queen on her throne. Dressed in another designer black dress, her blonde hair pinned to perfection, she radiated control. Two of her friends flanked her, whispering behind manicured hands. When she saw me, she didn't even bother with civility. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "This is a formality. Michael left everything to me, as he should. Don't embarrass yourself." I tightened my grip on the suitcase. "I'm here because Seal asked me to be." She smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Fine. Sit in the corner. Watch how real families handle business." I took a seat opposite her, my heart pounding. Seal entered, his presence silencing the room. He carried a stack of documents tied with ribbon, their official seals gleaming under the light. He greeted the room with solemn calm. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Michael James Thompson." The room grew quiet. Even Joyce's smirk faltered. Seal cleared his throat, sliding on reading glasses. "To my cousin Tyler, I leave my collection of vintage wines. To my business partner, Mark Stevens, I leave my shares in the Riverside Development Project. Minor gifts. Joyce smiled smugly, confident that the grand reveal was coming. She folded her hands, waiting for her triumph. Seal turned the page, his voice steady. To my beloved mother, Clara Thompson, I leave the majority of my estate, including all business interests, stock portfolios, and liquid assets, totaling approximately $29 million. The words crashed into the room like a thunderclap. Silence followed, thick, heavy, unbelievable. My breath caught in my throat. 29 million. The number didn't seem real. Across the table, Joyce's face drained of color. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then, a strangled whisper. That's impossible. Seal ignored her and continued. To my wife, Joyce Thompson, I leave the Santa Monica condominium, valued at approximately $800,000, along with all furnishings and personal effects contained therein. Joyce shot to her feet, fury twisting her features. No, this is fraud. He would never. But Seal raised a hand, calm and unshaken. These are Michael's legal wishes, executed properly, with witnesses. The will stands. I sat frozen, my calloused hands gripping the suitcase. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted, and Joyce knew it. Joyce's chair screeched against the marble floor as she lunged toward Seal's desk, her manicured hand slamming against the polished wood. You think you can take this from me? From me? I was his wife. I shared his bed. I built this life with him. Her voice rose higher with each word, slicing through the silence like broken glass. Seal remained calm, hands folded neatly on the table. Mrs. Thompson, this will was signed 3 months ago, witnessed by 2 independent parties, and notarized. It is perfectly valid. Joyce's eyes blazed. She spun toward me, pointing a trembling finger. This is your doing. You poisoned him against me. An old woman who couldn't even keep up with his success. I gripped the suitcase handle tighter, willing my voice to remain steady. I didn't poison anything. Michael made his choice. Her laugh was sharp, hollow. Choice? Please. He pitied you. He felt guilty. That's the only reason your name is on those papers. Seal removed his glasses, his expression firm. If you wish to contest the will, Mrs. Thompson, that is your legal right. But until then, these terms stand. Joyce staggered back into her chair, her face pale, lips trembling. For a moment, I thought she might collapse. But then her spine straightened, her mask of composure sliding back into place. She smoothed her skirt with deliberate precision, her eyes cold and sharp again. Fine, she said, her voice lower now, calculated. Then I'll see you in court. And when I'm finished, that money will be mine. All of it. She gathered her purse and stormed toward the door, her heels striking the marble like gunshots. At the threshold, she paused and looked back at me. This isn't over, old woman. Not by a long shot. The door slammed shut with such force the windows rattled. Silence filled the room again, broken only by the faint hum of traffic far below. Seal exhaled, adjusting the papers she'd scattered. Prepare yourself, Mrs. Thompson. She won't go quietly. Joyce has resources, and she'll use every one of them to challenge this. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words pressing down on me. All my life I had fought with wrenches and grease, not courtrooms and lawyers. But for Michael, for the memory of the boy with the missing tooth and the tiny fish, I would not back down. I tucked Michael's sealed letter into my suitcase and stood. Whatever storm Joyce was about to unleash, I would face it head on. 3 weeks later, I found myself walking up the cold marble steps of the Los Angeles County Superior Court. My boots echoed in the grand hallway, every step reminding me how far I was from my garage in Texas. Beside me, Seal carried a thick leather briefcase, his calm presence steadying my nerves. Inside the courtroom, Joyce was already seated at the plaintiff's table, her lawyer at her side. Richard Stone's sharp suit, slick smile, reputation for tearing families apart in inheritance battles. He adjusted his tie, as if the case were already won. Joyce leaned close to him, whispering, her eyes darting toward me with venom. Judge Williams entered, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that brooked no nonsense. The bailiff called the room to order, and the trial began. Stone rose first. Your Honor, this case is about undue influence. A grieving son, weakened by illness, manipulated by his mother into rewriting his will. Mrs. Joyce Thompson, his lawful wife, was cruelly cast aside in favor of a woman who hadn't been part of his daily life for years. I sat rigid, biting back the urge to shout. Manipulated? I had barely seen Michael in those last 2 years, thanks to Joyce's careful wall of excuses. Seal stood, his voice measured and calm. Your Honor, Michael Thompson was of sound mind. The will was properly executed, witnessed, and notarized. The evidence will show he made deliberate choices. Choices reflecting his lifelong bond with his mother, not coercion. Joyce dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the grieving widow. Her sobs were perfectly timed, delicate enough not to ruin her makeup. But I caught the way she peeked sideways to see if the gallery was watching. Witnesses testified. The notary who had overseen the will described Michael as calm, focused, and precise. His doctor confirmed he was mentally sharp up to the day he died. Seal presented business records showing Michael was making million-dollar decisions weeks before his heart attack. Stone tried to twist every fact, painting me as a manipulative old woman hungry for wealth. Isn't it true? He pressed. That you resented Joyce from the beginning? That you never believed she was good enough for your son? I met his gaze, my voice steady. I didn't trust her, and I was right not to. That's not resentment. That's truth. The gallery stirred. Even Judge Williams raised an eyebrow. Stone scowled, clearly displeased that his theatrics weren't landing. As the session ended, Seal leaned close. She's desperate, Clara. That's why Stone is painting you as the villain. But remember, truth cuts sharper than their lies. Walking out of the courthouse, I knew this fight had only just begun, and somewhere in the middle of all her performance, Joyce was starting to crack. A week after the first court session, I returned to my motel late one evening to find an envelope slipped under the door. No stamp, no address, just my name in elegant handwriting. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Clara, this fight is tearing us both apart. Perhaps we can talk privately. For Michael's sake. Meet me at the Garden Terrace Cafe tomorrow at noon. Joyce! I nearly laughed. The woman who had shut me out of her husband's funeral now wanted to talk for Michael's sake. Still, I went. Not because I trusted her, but because I needed to hear what game she was playing. The cafe overlooked a manicured garden, sunlight glinting off crystal water pitchers. Joyce sat at a corner table, dressed not in black this time, but in soft, gray silk. Her expression was carefully crafted, half sorrow, half gentle concern. She rose to greet me, arms outstretched. Clara, she said warmly, I'm so glad you came. I stayed still, arms at my side. What do you want, Joyce? She placed a hand over her heart, sighing. We're both grieving. We should stand together, not fight. Michael would want peace between us. I studied her face, the corners of her lips twitching as she forced the smile. Michael would want honesty, I said flatly. Her eyes flickered, then softened again. Look, you've lived simply all your life. 29 million is a burden, not a blessing. Let me manage it. You'll have security, I'll have continuity. Everyone wins. So there it was, the real reason for this little performance. I leaned back in my chair. You mean you'll have control? And I'll be your puppet. Her hand tightened around the glass of water, knuckles white. Don't be dramatic. I'm offering a chance for dignity. Do you really think you can manage corporations, stock portfolios, legal affairs? I met her gaze, calm and unblinking. I managed raising a boy alone on a mechanic's wage. I managed burying my husband, and now my son. I think I can handle numbers on paper. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second, her jaw clenched, her eyes sharp as blades. Then, she smiled again, syrupy sweet. You're making a mistake, Clara. But don't worry. The court will fix it. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table for my coffee. No, Joyce. The court will expose it. Joyce. End Joyce. End of quote. End of quota. End of quote. End of quote. End of quote. End quote. Her voice followed me out the door, low and venomous. You'll regret this. As I stepped into the bright California sun, I realized something. Joyce wasn't pretending for me. She was pretending for herself, clinging to the illusion that her grip on Michael's world hadn't already slipped away. The courtroom was packed on the final day of testimony. The air felt heavy, as if everyone inside knew the walls were about to hear something they'd never forget. Joyce entered in a navy suit, her hair styled immaculately, her lawyer Stone at her side. She looked like she was walking into a boardroom, not a fight for her late husband's legacy. Seal whispered to me, "Stay steady, Clara. This is where the mask falls." Judge Williams called us to order. Stone rose first, pacing dramatically before the jury box. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is simple. A grieving widow has been robbed her husband, manipulated by an aging mother, clinging to relevance. Clara Thompson, absent for years, suddenly reappears and reaps millions. This is not justice. This is exploitation." His words dripped with poison, but I sat still, my hands folded neatly, eyes fixed on the judge. Seal stood. His calm voice filled the room. This case is about intention. Michael Thompson, a successful man of sound mind, chose to leave his wealth to the woman who gave him life and never once asked for a dime, his mother. Not out of guilt, not out of manipulation, but out of recognition. He knew who truly loved him. Joyce shifted uncomfortably, her lips pressed tight. Then Seal called the notary to the stand, a young woman with sharp glasses and a steady voice. "Did Mr. Thompson appear coerced when he signed this will?" "Not at all," she replied. "He was clear, deliberate. He asked me to double-check several clauses. He said, and I quote, 'I want my mother to be safe when I'm gone.'" Gasps rippled through the gallery. Stone shot up. "Objection, hearsay." "Sustained," the judge said. But the words had already landed. Then came the medical testimony. Michael's doctor swore under oath. He was mentally competent until the day he died. No signs of depression, no impairment. Joyce's face cracked. She dabbed at her eyes, but her hand shook. Finally, Seal called me to the stand. My legs trembled as I took the oath, but when I looked at Joyce across the room, something hardened inside me. "Mrs. Thompson," Seal asked gently, "did you ever ask your son for money?" "Never," I said firmly. "Not once." "Did you ever expect to inherit from him?" I shook my head. I expected nothing. Michael was my son. That was enough. Stone leapt to his feet, eyes flashing. "Isn't it true you resented Joyce from the moment she married your son?" I met his glare. "I didn't trust her, because I knew she didn't love Michael. She loved what he gave her. And I was right. The room stirred. Even the judge leaned forward slightly. Joyce lost control. She stood abruptly, shouting across the courtroom. "You don't know what you're talking about. He loved me. He needed me. I made him a man of status." Her voice cracked, disparate, unpolished. For the first time, the mask was gone. Judge Williams banged her gavel. "Mrs. Thompson, sit down or you will be held in contempt." The gallery buzzed. Everyone had seen it. The unraveling of Joyce, the truth, laid bare. And in that moment, I knew the war was ending. The courtroom was tense as Judge Williams adjusted her glasses. Her voice rang with finality. "After reviewing all evidence, this court finds the last will and testament of Michael James Thompson valid, executed with full competency, and free of undue influence. The estate will be distributed as written." Her gavel struck once. The sound echoed like thunder. Joyce's face went pale. Stone muttered something under his breath, but he knew it was over. The whispers of the gallery swirled around us, but I sat perfectly still. Joyce rose, trembling with fury. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll take everything from you." I stood slowly, my voice calm. "You already took enough, Joyce. Michael made his choice. You can't erase that." Her eyes burned with rage, but there was nothing left to say. She stormed out, her heels clattering against the marble, the door slamming behind her. Seal leaned toward me. "Justice stood tall today, Clara." Your son's voice was heard. Later that night in my quiet motel room, I opened the letter Michael had left for me. His handwriting was steady, each word pulling me back to the boy I once raised. "Mom, I left everything to you because you never asked for anything. You loved me when I had nothing, and that love was the only wealth that mattered. This is my way of saying thank you for the sacrifices, for the chances, for always believing in me." Tears blurred the page. My chest ached. But for the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Days later, back in Texas, I placed the letter beside the cracked photo of 8-year-old Michael holding his first fish. That photo had always been a reminder of what I'd lost. Now, it was proof of what remained a bond no money could break. The suitcase I'd once carried in desperation sat open on the bench. I closed it gently, the latch snapping shut with a final click. The suitcase was the same, I whispered. But I wasn't. This time, I was the one closing the door. So that's the truth of how betrayal almost destroyed everything, until silence and strength turned the story around. But there's one thing I didn't tell you at the start. What if the betrayal wasn't just about money, but about love, power, and a secret no one expected? Click on this video here if you want to hear the next story of family, betrayal, and revenge. I'll see you in the next one.